Often, when a publisher sends a brief, they will include a reference, a track that represents the mood or emotion that they're going for. But how do you use that? And how do you avoid plagiarizing or cloning or being too close to that reference? Well, we're going to talk about that and the things that you should be listening out for when you incorporate a reference into your writing process. And we're also going to listen to a cue called Out of Time by a longtime 52 Cues supporter, Richard Bagley, on this week's 52 Cues podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to the 52 Cues podcast. It is week 3 of 2022, and I'm so glad you found me, however you found me. 52 Cues is a community of working, like-minded, career-minded composers looking to build a sustainable career making music, specifically production music. And so this channel and the community is all about inspiring, educating, and motivating fellow composers. We're going to be listening to one of those community member composers, Richard Bagley. We're going to be listening to his cue, Out of Time, a little bit later. You can check out the timestamps below to skip over. But before we get started, I do want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose support helps keep things going. We're going to be talking a lot more about my Patreon at the end of the video. But I wanted to talk today about references and what do you do with references and how do you avoid being too close to the reference? Now, referencing is nothing new at all. The film music world uses references all the time, references, aka temp tracks, and talk to any film composer and they're gonna share some war stories about having a director who is too in love with the temp track, and there are several films which have been famously temped to other music, and like even Star Wars was temped with the planets, I believe, and was actually edited with that music, and then they bring in John Williams to put the original score. So using reference material is nothing new in the film world, and it's certainly nothing new for us production music composers, because we will often get references from publishers or clients or libraries who want to give us an example of what they want and a piece of music that captures the mood, emotion, tone, vibe, genre, several different aspects of what they're looking for. And mood and emotion and atmosphere and tone, vibe, those are very abstract terms. And so if I was to tell you, or let's say I was to tell 5 different composers to write something that sounds surreal, I would get 5 very, very different cues back. But if I said, write something surreal and then gave some references that went along with that, then I would imagine that those 5 composers would give me similar sounding types of cues. They wouldn't be copies or whatever, but the reference helps us composers dial in and narrow the focus so that hopefully we make the client happy, and they'll use our cues and they'll accept them into their library, and then they'll get placement. So we get references all the time. But the challenge for us, two main things. The first is, how do we use that reference? What do we do? What do we do with it? We get the reference and we say thanks, but how do we extract the information from the reference? And I want to talk about that. And there are a handful of things that we want to mine from the reference material. The other aspect of referencing is we don't want to be too close to the reference. Definitely don't want to plagiarize, and we don't want to clone, right? And unless, there are times when you will be asked to clone, and it's not the best feeling thing in the world, and it's the least creative part of this gig. So you might get asked to clone, but for the most part, we don't want to make a copy of that. We're not making a copycat, whether legal on this side of legal or not. That's not, and I'm not talking the ethics of this, but what are the ways that we take the reference material, incorporate them into our cues, but make sure that we're not getting too close to the reference? Well, that's what, like I said, that's what I want to talk about today. So the first thing is, what are we looking to extract from a reference? Well, the first thing for me is instrumentation. What instruments are you hearing? Are they acoustic instruments? Are they synthetic instruments? My rule of thumb is if I'm given reference material that contains acoustic sounds, whether it's sampled or not, but sounds that would be played by a human being with their hands and their face, then I will stick to those sounds or something as similar as possible into my cues. So if I hear guitar, then I'm going to probably incorporate some kind of guitar. If I hear piano, probably piano. If it's electric piano, then probably electric piano. But the instrumentation goes a long way to communicating those things like tone, vibe, emotion, mood. The instrumentation. If I bring staccato strings to the table, that's going to sound very different than consordino pianissimo strings, legato, super sustained strings. So it's important when you're doing your reference work and you're listening out to make sure that you're being as specific as possible with yourself when you are describing your instrumentation. What instrumentation are you hearing? Now, if I hear synthetic sounds, then I'm not looking to copy necessarily that specific sound, but I'll find something that's close. So if it's a brass pad, or if it's some sort of ethereal chordal pad, then I'll find something that kind of matches that. Is it bright and distorted sounding, or is it filtered and rumbly? Those are the types of parameters I'll go looking for. So the first thing I'm looking to extract when I'm listening to a reference is the instrumentation. And if I'm given multiple references, then I'll look to triangulate the instrumentation. What instrumentation am I hearing across multiple references? If you're given a reference or if you're given 3 references from a client and all 3 have acoustic piano in it, you better put acoustic piano into your cues, because clearly that's something that's resonating with the publisher, and that's something they want. Now, if you hear 1 acoustic piano, 1 electric piano, and 1 harpsichord, okay, now things are a little bit more flexible. I don't think I've ever gotten 3 references and it's harpsichord, piano, and EP, but that's not to say it can't happen. So instrumentation, that's the first thing I shoot for. It's the first thing I go for. The next aspect I'm listening for is harmony. What key are we in? What chords are we using? How are those chords voiced? What's the harmonic rhythm? Meaning, how often are those chords changing? Because that element also adds a lot to defining the mood or emotion of a specific cue. And as cliche as it sounds, kind of, major happy, minor sad. I mean, we're talking about pretty base emotions here. And culturally, we are programmed to hear major chords as something positive happening and minor chords something negative happening. There are many shades to those emotions, but It can be as basic as that. The harmonic language. Is it a drone cue? Is the chord just hanging on one tonality the whole time? And is that a major tonality or is it a minor tonality? Are the chords changing very quickly, every measure, every two beats? What about the phrasing? Is it holding on one chord for several phrases and then the chord changes? How are those chords articulated? Are they block chords or are they arpeggiated chords? What's the articulation of the chords? What's the harmonic rhythm? What's the chord quality? All of those things get baked together to reinforce what the mood and emotion of a cue is. And clients will give you references to help communicate those things because they could say positive. I could say, I want something that sounds melancholy yet inspiring. Well, the harmony can communicate that. They could say something that says, I want uplifting and jubilant. Well, the chord qualities, how those chords are articulated, how fast those chords change, all go to communicate that. But if I just say jubilant, jubilant, I might be mispronouncing that, but then give you a pile of references, then you can narrow your focus. So instrumentation, acoustic sounds, synthetic sounds, what are the textures that are present? The harmonic language. What chords are we hearing? What are those chord qualities? Are they extended chords, major chords, minor chords, really dissonant chords? How are those chords articulated? What's the harmonic rhythm? How fast are those chords changing? Is it drone cue? Is it a drone-based harmony? Or is it a harmony that's changing very quickly? And then finally, the rhythmic aspect of the cue. What types of rhythms? What tempo is it? These are the next things that I'm looking to extract from a reference. Is it 16th note based? Is it eighth note based? Is it a swing pulse? Is it a straight pulse? Often, that will get communicated by the harmonic motion. So if you're hearing really staccato, happy major chords, like with staccato strings, then that at 150 beats per minute, now things are starting to come together. We have strings, staccato strings, that's instrumental texture, the chord quality, how fast those chords are changing, and the rhythm in which those chords are being expressed. So if you're given multiple references, let's back up to chord quality. If you're given 3 references and it's all minor, it's all slow moving harmony, meaning the chords aren't changing every phrase, but maybe every 3 phrases. And every single one of those references has that slow moving harmony, then I'm absolutely going to incorporate that type of harmonic motion into my cue. If it's kind of all over the place, maybe this one has, chords changing every measure, this one has a drone, and this one has, every 8 measures. Then I'll kind of split the difference. Kind of like with the instrumentation we talked about in the clav and harpsichord. All right, I don't think I said clav, but harpsichord and EP and piano. Likewise, the rhythm. Kind of do a BPM check and average the rhythm of the cues of the references that you're given. If they're all around 140, then man, just put your DAW to 140 and move on. Call it a day. Because here's ultimately how I think of references. References are helping us make compositional decisions. And if the references all say the same thing, then the reference is making that compositional decision for us, which means that we can get on with the craft of writing. So if I'm given references and they're all around 70 beats per minute, then I'm just going to set my DAW to 70 and move on. That's not to say I can't tweak it. I certainly can tweak it later, but I'm going to set it to 70, decision made, and I'm off to the races. And now I can focus on writing and composing. But I'm not going to get bogged down wringing my hands over what tempo my cues should be if I'm given a ton of references. Just set your tempo to that. If you're given references and they all have electric bass, then electric bass it is, move on. If they all have cello, if they all have really distorted, breathy synths, then decision made, move on. Incorporate it, put it into your cue, and move on. It's all about letting the reference help shortcut, but not in a bad way, but help to shortcut the compositional process so you can get on with making music. Now, where do we get in trouble with references? Or how can we find ourselves getting into trouble? Because there's no worse feeling than writing a cue you're really proud of and then getting the feedback from the client that's too close to the reference. And we have to assume that the publisher is intimately familiar with the references they're giving you. I sure as heck know that in the film world, directors are intimately familiar with their temp track because often they will edit their movie to the temp track. So I always work under the assumption that the library, publisher, client, whatever, who is sending references, I always work under the assumption that they're intimately familiar with those references. So I never want to be too close to the reference because I hate that feeling. I mean, I'm sure there are worse feelings, but that's up there as far as rejection goes. Because then you're left going, well, how do I fix it? Well, here are the areas where we get into trouble. First of all, the harmonic language. If you have a cue that is in the same key and using the same progression as the reference, we can find ourselves in trouble. Not in legal trouble, not in copyright issue trouble, because you can't copyright a chord progression and you can't copyright a key signature, although I'm sure there's somebody out there trying it. But you can't copyright a chord progression. So this isn't legal jeopardy, but as far as originality in terms of your client, try not to write in the same key as the references. I will often shift by a half step or even a whole step. And that will immediately, especially if you do a half step, it will immediately bring a whole different block of chords to the table. Now, what you can do is you can write in the same key as the reference and then just grab everything in your DAW and shift it up and down after the fact. It's kind of a shortcut if you want to do that. I find that gets complicated when you're recording instruments and then you're manipulating audio and just playing a different key or use a capo on a guitar or something. But you don't want to be in the same key as your references, especially if multiple references are in the same key. And you don't want to use the same chord progression. Don't straight up copy the chord progression. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with a drone tension cue where it's just holding on one chord the whole time, yeah, I think you're okay there. It's only one chord. But the harmonic language and the actual chord progression can be kind of a giveaway. Now, I have had times where I've done that and the client didn't like it and pointed me back to the reference and essentially said, just use that harmony. And I did. And it's good. Yeah, it's fine. It's a great cue. I enjoyed it. Ended up, I was referencing a Rachel Portman track off of the Life of a Dog soundtrack, which Rachel Portman's really great. Highly underrated, in my opinion. But having the harmony be too close. And then your melodic construction. Obviously, this is where we get into some legal jeopardy if you have a melody which is too similar to the reference. If you're given a reference that has a sonic brand or something on it, you definitely don't want to incorporate any of that. But your melody being too similar, and for me, that's there's kind of two aspects that will govern that. First of all, is the melodic contour and the melodic rhythm. You put those things together, and even if you write something that's not note for note, it runs the risk of it sounding too close. And even if it's not plagiarism, you might be getting into cloning territory, in which case then you're going to get a rejection from your library and they'll say it's too close to the reference. But the melodic contour, if it's going up, and if it's going up in dotted eighths, sixteenths, then you write a melody which is ascending in dotted eighths, sixteenths, then that's veering too close to the reference. So pull back. It might be that you could do a descending motion instead of a dotted eighth, sixteenth. How about a sixteenth dotted eighth? Or triplets. As soon as you bring in triplets, then you run the risk of being too far away as far as the rhythmic reference. Yeah, it's a balance. It's a real balance. But having a chord progression which is too similar in the same key as the reference, and having your melodic contour be too similar, and the melodic rhythm. And if you're writing drum and percussion, straight up copying the drums and percussion, this happens or is very tempting when you're writing hip hop and referencing hip hop, to just use that hip hop groove. You can't copyright a hip hop beat, but you run the risk of it being too close to the reference. So I would be really, really careful there. So it's using references ultimately is about helping to support your compositional process so you can meet the publisher's expectations. That's what using references is all about. It's a way for them to communicate what they want so that you could give them what they can use. Now, obviously, if the client wanted to use those references, they could license those. But so there's a reason that they're not using the references that they gave you, especially if they're from another show. So we want to honor that. We want to give them something that they're expecting and something that they can use, but we don't want to clone. We definitely don't want to plagiarize. We want to be in the ballpark, but we want to be original, but not so original that it gets outside of the mood, emotion, tone, and vibe that they're looking for. So what about you? What's your experience using references? What are some things that you look for when you write your cues, and how do you incorporate references in your compositional process? I would absolutely love to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments below. So we're going to change gears now, and we are going to take a listen to Out of Time by 52Q's community member, Richard Bagley, and I'm going to be giving my thoughts and feedback along the way. Yeah, like I said, Richard is a longtime supporter of 52Qs. Thank you so much for your support. Loving this. Can we put a some kind of reverse something? I would do, because we're getting into some synthy hybrid stuff. There's a couple of spots, because we kind of go into this spot right here. I almost would save the impact, this large drum impact, for the downbeat, and do it, just go straight into the little vacuum moment, because this is kind of a little one bar one bar settling before things really push forward. So if we did no downbeat, and then the impact. Just nitpicking here. This sounds great. Nice, really nice build. Nice edit points. Same thing kind of there, although I wouldn't make it as pronounced. I kind of want to hear that impact really big on the downbeat as opposed to the bar before. Maybe end because we're kind of about to go into our breakdown spot right around the minute mark. Perfectly placed breakdown here. Love that. Oh, you know, Thomas Newman is my spirit animal. So, you know what would sound, if you want to go full Thomas Newman, electric bass, which was one of those textural things that he adds on so many of his cues that give it a very contemporary feel, is actual electric thumb bass or your finger style bass. Can be really, really nice. I almost wonder if you just don't put, not that you don't put a downbeat, but push the energy into the dun dun dun. So put the downbeat or on the 4E and maybe have boom, 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 just so the energy doesn't die out too much here. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, some electric bass is going to sound nice. Again, if you want to go full Thomas Newman. I feel like that sub drop, I liked it, but I feel like the payoff wasn't big enough. Yeah, I feel like we need to be in that kind of level of energy coming off of a sub drop like that. We're a little long. I would actually skip. I would go from the sub drop into right there. See if I can do it. Yeah, it's a little long and a little repetitive, and I feel like we need to get on with it. And so I would probably skip over this area here. Maybe a harmonic change. Let's do I want to? Yeah, let me open up a Logic session real quick just to get a quick piano. Oh, I like the rhythmic change there. So what key are we in? So we're in D. I go to the B flat. Go to the G. and just hint at that rhythmic, hint at that harmonic change. So we're and I know I bang on and on about ending on the downbeat, but I think I would do that. I would try to get away with that. And I would not do don't. It's nice as an ornamentation, but your primary melody and your primary hook is jump, 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 and really punch that. Boom, 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 jump, 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 jump. That's absolutely how I would end that. Really enjoyed this. Really nice work. And you should have no problems finding a home for this. Thank you so much, Richard, for sending that along. If this is something you enjoyed and you want to participate, why don't you join us over at the 52 Qs Facebook group? This was a cue that was submitted in our week 3. We've already got week 4 happening. And so community members and family members, the 52 family members submit their cues and they get feedback. And so if that's something that you are interested in, then yeah, why don't you join us over at 52cues.com or at facebook.com/groups/52cues. Would absolutely love to have you. And if the feedback is something that you enjoy, I actually, and I don't talk about it much, but I offer video feedback as a service, and I do lessons and all that other kind of stuff. Those links are all down below. Like I said, I don't talk about it a ton here, but it's something that I do offer. Give video feedback, usually about 15 minutes or so, where I listen to your cue and provide my thoughts and everything. Again, information below if you are interested. But that is going to do it for me today. I thank you so much for joining me. And I also, like I said, want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose support helps keep things going. To be a patron, it's just $1 a month. Toss a coin to your YouTuber. And it's just a way for you to show support and to help, pay for things, pay for hosting and all of that business that I have happening in my world. And also, to be a patron, you get access to my music production live streams. And I do live streams at least once a week. We just finished a brand new cue last night that I've already sent off to the publisher. And there's a cue that I wrote last year. And we wrote 35 cues together last year. And one of those cues, I hope I'm not putting my cart before my horse, but one of those cues I think is going to get some love this weekend on football. I hope. If it does, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I'll get boxed out. Would be the first time, but that's how it goes sometimes. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you found this helpful. And as always, I absolutely value your feedback. Would love to hear from you in the comments below. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much. I hope that you have a fantastic week 4, and I will see you next time. Until then, peace. The 52 Qs podcast is copyright 2022 Dave Croft, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the 52 Qs community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52cues.com.